Um, so Mem Dalet Amud Beis at the bottom, 44b, 10 lines from the bottom. The Mishnah continued with all the things that are different for Yom Kippur. Every day, the pan for the coals was heavy, and today was light. So the Mishnah, the Brisa says that every day it's geled, it's the thickness of the pan, the metal was thicker. Vayom rach, and today was actually thinner and softer. And every day the handle was short. Vayom arucha, and today it was long, so that he can support it, as the Gemara say, he can support it with the rest of his arm as well, not only with his hand. My time is so that his arm will support it, and he's not only holding with his hand, because he's fasting and it's a long day with a lot of avodah to do. And to make it easier, it was a lighter pan that he didn't only hold with his hand; he held he had a long enough handle that can go, and he can support it with his arm. And every day the pan that he would use did not have a bell on it, and this had some sort of bell in order so that wherever he walked with the pan, he could be heard, as the Torah says that that v'nishma kollel b'voya l'kodesh, his sound would be heard when he comes to the kodesh, and so there was a bell on it. By his regular garments, the golden garments, there were bells on the bottom of the me'il. Over here, there's a bell on this kli. Divrei Ben Haskan. This is the words of Ben Haskan. Next, the Mishnah says, every day its gold was actually yellowish, right? So it was a yellow gold. Amar Rav Chisda, and now it was a reddish gold. So the Amar Rav Chisda said, Shiva Zahavim Heim. Throughout the Psukim or the Tanakh, we have 7 types of gold. Zav, just gold. V'zav Toiv, good gold, or the better gold. V'zav Ophir, and gold of a place called Ophir. It's mentioned in the Pasuk in Malachim. V'zav Mofaz, which is found in Pasuk in Malachim as well. V'zav Shachut, also there in Malachim. V'zav Sagur, also there in Malachim. V'zav Parvim, which is Parvayim, which is in Divrei Yoma, in Chronicles. V'zav Toiv. So Gemara now says Zav Toiv, gold and the good gold, as it says in the creation Bereshis, V'zav Haaretz Hi Toiv, that the gold of the area where the rivers separate, that's where the gold is good. So we see that there's a good gold. Zav Ophir, what does that mean? The Asiba Ophir, that comes from a place called Ophir. Zav Mofaz, what does that mean? So here we go to Mem Hey Amud Aleph 45a. Shadoim Lapaz. It's a very shiny, clear, shiny gold that looks almost. It shines like a gem. Zav Shachut, when is the gold that is Shachut? He said that is gold that is like a thread. Chut is a thread. Shachut, Shanit v'kachut. It can be woven like a thread. It's so thin and pliable, malleable. Zav Sagur, closed gold. What does that mean? B'shah sheniftach. Kol hachanuyos nizgaros is when the shop selling this kind of gold opens, all other shops clothes. Zahav parvai, the gold of parvayim. What does that mean? Shadayim dampar. It's reddish and it's similar to the gold to the color of blood of bulls. So it's a deep red gold, and that's the gold that was used for Yom Kippur. Ravashi says it's actually 5, and each one of them has these 5 that were mentioned: the Ophir and Mofaz and Shachut and Sagur. However, each one of them has 2 levels: the good and the regular. Each one has gold and good gold. Indeed, we have a brisa that says it's the gold of the base of Mikdash that was used for the pans and for the kalim were of a yellow gold. Vayom Adam today it was reddish on Yom Kippur. V'hainu zav parvayim shadem adam par. And that's what is the mention of parvayim is, because it was a gold that was reddish like the blood of a bull. So we know when we talked about that every single day the Kohen Gadol, the Kahana, the Kohen Gadol, if he wanted, would bring the incense. They would take the measure, split a half in the morning, half in the evening, and that was the Ketores, the daily Ketores, the special addition for Yom Kippur was that it also they bring Melech Hafnav, both of his palmfuls of Ketores Samim Daka, Ketores, the incense of spices Daka, finely ground. And in our mission it said on Yom Kippur was doubly fine, finer than fine. Daka min adaka. Every day was just fine, and today was daka min adaka, finer than fine. So the Brisa taught daka. Why does it say that Ketores Havdaka Yom Kippur? It says you would bring fine Ketores. Well, it already says that every day, right? It already says in making the spices and making the incense, you have to grind it up very well to make it fine. To tell you that this has to go for Yom Kippur, it has to go back in and be doubly ground again to refine it and make it even a finer incense. Every day it would go up on the east side of the ramp. The Amamar, as the Brisa taught, that all turnings on the base of Mikdash, when you do something Kaddish, you're always going to turn to the right. So facing the ramp, which was on the southern side of the Mizbeach, so you would be back to the south, and you'd be facing the north, and so you go up on the right, and so that's going to be the eastern side of the ramp. And you're going to turn, as you come to the top of the ramp and turn onto the Mizbeach, you're going to turn to the right, which is to the east. So you're walking up the east side, and you're going to turn to the east side, and so you're constantly on the east. That's why you'd walk up the right side of the Mizbeach, which is the east. However, on this day, on Yom Kippur, the Kohen Gadol would go up in the middle and walk down in the middle. So my time, what's the reason that he would go up in the middle and not to the right? Because of the honor of the Kohen Gadol doing the work on Yom Kippur for Kollel Yisrael, representing all the Yisrael. So the honor of that, he would walk up in the center. However, Rabbi Yehuda says that was true every day. Every day he would walk up on the center as the Kohen Gadol. Every day, the first opinion also said that every day the Kohen Gadol, when he washed his hands and feet, he would, like all the other Kohanim, go to the basin and wash from the basin. He didn't have a jug of water brought to him. But But today on Yom Kippur they brought a kisan shalmayim, a pitcher of water to him. My time again, the honor of the Kohen Gadol of doing the work that he's doing on Yom Kippur, they would bring him the water to wash. So now here we're going to have various opinions, as we saw in the Mishnah, as to the pyres on top of the fire, on top of the mizbeach. We talked about this a little bit a short while ago. On top of the mizbeach, you had the main, when we talk about the wood and the wood donations that were done, we talked about that there were two main fires. It was the larger fire, besides for the tapuach, which was in the center, a mound of the ash and the burnt materials. So you had a ma'aracha gedola, the major pyre, the main pyre, which was a larger fire, and then there was the smaller fire on the side from which the incense wood or coals were taken. Well, we actually have the opinion of opinions in the Mishnah of whether it was just those two, and on Yom Kippur there was a third to take the coals for the incense in the Holy of Holies of the Kodesh HaKodashim, or there were always three, and on Yom Kippur there were four, always four, and on Yom Kippur there were five. So let's see. First opinion, the Mishnah said that every day there were four pyres of sets of fire. Every day there was two fires, and today there were three. What were the two fires? Maracha Gedola, Achas Maracha Gedola. One was the main fire, the large pyre. Achas Maracha Shniya Shakateres, and one was the second, the smaller fire, of which the Keteres was taken. So the coals, the fire for the Keteres, for the incense, was taken from there. The Achas, and today on Yom Kippur, they would add another one for the taking of the coals in order to bring it into the Holy of Holies of the Kodesh HaKodashim, the Fnei V'Lifnim, in order to have the incense burn in there. Different Rabbi Yehuda, that's Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. However, Rabbi Yossi says, no, B'chol Yoim Sholish. Every day there were three. B'hayoim Arba. And today there was a fourth one as well. One, the large fire, and one, the second fire that was there for the daily keteres. And there was another pyre that was there to keep the fire going. So you had a fire just in case the main fire starts weakening. You would then take some burning wood from the sort of like a pilot light, right? There was the constant a constant fire there to make sure that you had burning wood to add to the existing fire if they needed. And the fourth one was additional for Yom Kippur, for the Kodesh HaKodashim, to take the coals to burn the incense in the Holy of Holies. However, Rabbi Meir is our text. Some say that's Rabbi, whatever the text is. So Rabbi Meir, our text says Rabbi Meir. We'll say Rabbi Meir, Eimer, B'chol Yom Arba B'Hayim Chamish. Every day there were four. Today there was a fifth. Achas Shol Maracha Gedola. One, the main fire of Achas Shamracha Shniya Shel Keteres. One, the second one was for the incense, the daily incense, the Keteres. V'achas Shel Kiyum Ha'esh. One for upkeep of the fire, as we talked about. V'achas Le'varim B'Darim Shenesaklu Mibe'erev. And one additional fire to burn the parts of the previous day's karbanos that had not been properly consumed of, not been properly burnt up the night before, and so that they put it on this. They would make another fire to burn that up. And today, that it's Yom Kippur, one they would add on Yom Kippur to burn the incense in the Kodesh HaKodashim. The kula alma miyas tarti islu. But everybody learns at least two. You have the major and the minor, the large and the smaller pyre. That's for sure. Minolan, how do we know this? So Omar Kra, the pasuk says, "This year shall you command the children of Aaron." The teaching of the Ola, the ascent offering. It goes upon the mukda, upon the burning pyre, on the mizbeach all night until the morning, and the fire of the mizbeach shall ignite in it. So, it already says that the Ola ascent offering has to go onto the fire that's burning on the mizbeach all night. So that tells us you need that big fire. The Esha Mizbeach took away. Then it ends and it says, and the fire of the Mizbeach shall burn in it or ignite in it. That tells you that you need a second fire. That you need a second fire and the incense was taken from there. And this is something we saw in the Gemara earlier. This idea that about a week and a half ago, that there was a need for a separate fire on the Mizbeach, second fire. Now, Rabbi Yossi says, well, there's another idea as well. You also need another, sort of as the pilot light, you're going to have another fire which is there to make sure that the main fire stays alight. Rabbi Yossi, Kiyame Eish Minole, how does he know that there's another fire for keeping it alive? He learns it from another pasuk. The pasuk says a few verses later, and the fire on the mizbeach shall ignite in it, not be extinguished. So from there he learns that there's another fire to make sure that the fire stays alight. Rabbi Yehuda. So how does Rabbi Yehuda respond? After all, in Vayikra 6, Vayikra Vav, a few psukim after it says the first fire, it says, and the fire shall be there to ignite it. So seemingly there's another fire. That is the lighting of the kindling. We saw this also earlier, that they would also have smaller kindling, like wood chips and smaller piece of wood to build up and get a fire, and to tell you that you have to have that, and that too is a mitzvah, a part of the lighting of the fire. And that this has to be done on the mizbeach. You can't kindle a little bit of fire and then bring it up on the mizbeach. So how does he? The Tanya, as we learned, Rabbi Yehuda says, how do we know that even the lighting of the kindling to start the fire shall be done only at the top of the mizbeach? So it says, and the fire on the mizbeach you shall ignite in it. So even the kindling, even the ignition of the fire also has to happen on the mizbeach itself. How do you know that you make another fire to keep the fire alive? That he uses this same verse, the fire on the mizbeach shall ignite it. So you see that the ignition, Rabbi Yehuda says the ignition has to happen on the mizbeach. Rabbi Yossi says that you have to have a source, a pyre specifically to keep the fire alive on the mizbeach. Well, then how does Rabbi Yossi know that the ignition, the initial lighting of the fire and the kindling has to happen on top of the mizbeach? Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Yossi, how does he know this? He learns it from the same source that Rabbi Shimon learns it. Where does Rabbi Shimon learn it? The Tani will learn. The children of Aaron, as Kahanim, they will put the fire on the Mizbeach. Limeid, and that teaches us, kosher, ubekli sharis. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says, that teaches us that from the fact that it says that the children of Aaron are going to be the ones that are going to put the fire on the Mizbeach, it tells us that the ignition of the fire has to be by a kohen. That's kosher. It has to be done by a kohen. It can't be done by a non-kohen. It can't be done by a non-kohen or even a kohen that's not kosher to do the service. Ubekli sharis, and it has to be done using the holy vessels, meaning the Kohen has to be dressed in the garments of the Kohen when he does it. In other words, the lighting of the fire, you may think, is just a preparatory act. I mean, it's just like a way to set up the Mizbeach, but it isn't actually a part of the service. So this tells us from the fact that it says B'nei Aaron HaKohen, the children of Aaron as Kohen have to put it on the Mizbeach, that it has to be done by a kosher Kohen and in full garb as a Kohen Gadol, as a Kohen. That's the way the service has to be done. It has to be done as a Kohen. That's Rabbi Yehuda. Amalei Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon says, what do you need that for? Do I even need that? Obviously, it has to be done by a Kohen because it says it has to be done on the Mizbeach. Do you even think a non-Kohen is going to walk up on the Mizbeach to light the fire? Of course not. So the teaching of the children of Aaron shall light the fire on the Mizbeach, that's the ignition. That's the kindling, to tell you that even the kindling has to be done on top of the Mizbeach. Rabbi Yehuda says, no, that's not sufficient. Perhaps he can do it while on the floor. He doesn't have to be up on the Mizbeach, and it can be done on the floor. True, the fire has to be done on top of the Mizbeach, but it doesn't mean the Kohen has to be on the Mizbeach. He could be using a fan. He could be using a, I'm forgetting the word for it, what you fan a flame by bellows. Thank you. Yes. So he can use a bellow. He can fan the flames, and he can light the fire while on the floor of the Mizbeach of the Azar of the courtyard, on top of the Mizbeach. Who tells you he has to go up on the Mizbeach? So Rabbi Shimon, you're right. If we knew it had to be done while the person was standing on the top of the Mizbeach, we know it has to be a Kohen. But who says it has to be? Perhaps he can do it on top. He can light the fire on top of the Mizbeach while standing on the floor. We saw similar about a non-Kohen shechting, that he could, perhaps if he had a long knife, perhaps he could shecht even from outside the door. We saw a question about that. So you see that that's a possibility. Kamash Malan, that's why Rabbi Yehuda says we need a teaching that it has to be on top of the Mizbeach, and it has to be by a kosher Kohen in full garb. Fine. Rabbi Meir added generally there was a fourth fire on the Mizbeach. How does he know that there's another fire needed for the parts that were on the Mizbeach the night before, and they were in the fire, and they didn't completely get consumed? And so when they set up the new pyre for the day, they're going to remove that and put it onto a fire that's going to burn throughout, burn it thoroughly. Now, since it says, and a fire on the Mizbeach shall burn, so that and tells you that there's another fire. And the Rabbanan say that, no, we're not saying a drash from the Vav to tell us that there's a need for another specific fire to burn all the parts on the Mizbeach that didn't burn the night before. Great. So the Rabbanan disagree with the Rabbi Meir and say you don't need a special fire, a pyre to burn that up. So what do you do with it? So you come in the morning. There are parts that are still on the fire that had not burnt up completely. So you take them off, and you reset the pyre, and you make a new fire. And what do you do with this? Yesterday's korban. So the Gemara says, indeed, you put it back onto the new, fresh pyre of fire and let it burn. The Tanya, as we learned, as we learned the Bryce, how do we know that yesterday's parts that did not burn up on the Mizbeach, and now we go to Mem Hamad base, he has to put it back up on the Mizbeach as on the pyre, and burn them. And if there isn't enough place, then he would organize it on the ram, or on the ledge that was halfway down the Mizbeach along the rim. And he would put it all there until the new fire was made. And then he would put it back on top of the fire, of the new fire. So basically, take all those parts off, set it aside in an appropriate place, either on the mizbeach, on the ramp, or on the ledge, on the seviv. Reset the fire by the large fire with the pyre woods and get it burning, and then put it back on. So how do we know that? Talmud Loimer, so the pasuk teaches, Asher Tochel Eish Hasoila. The kohen, by removing the ash, says the kohen is going to come and remove some of the ash from the previous day. Asher Tochel Eish Hasoila. It says the ash will remove, which the fire is eating the oil on the mizbeach, or consuming on the mizbeach. Now, it's not talking about the original fire, because that's already there. It says you should have a fire. Must be that it's talking about replacement. Yesterday's leftovers that didn't thoroughly burn through are going to be put back. Rabbi Meir ekule oila atamachse, v'atamachse ekule keteres, and the Rabbi Meir says that this is something else. Ikule oila is when you put something on the parts of the scent offering, the carbon, the animal that's put on the fire. Sometimes it'll fall off; it'll pop off from the fire itself. So that part you replace. And that's the meaning that the fire will eat the oil, meaning will consume which is put back on when it popped off. But the previous day's carbon, to put it back on today, you're not going to do it. So and you're not going to put back the ikulik teres for the incense that comes off. The Tani we learned Rabbi Chananya ben Menyumi b'debei Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov. Rabbi Chananya, the son of Menyumi, taught in the academy of Elazar ben Yaakov, that the fire will consume the scent offering which is on the mizbeach. You're going to put back up the ikule oila. That's the parts of the oila scent offering that had fallen off. And you don't put back ketoris that came off. That the meaning is that the coals that you're taking from there for the ketoris. So therefore, you go the next day. Once it's already, you've done the ketoris for the next day, that you're not going to put back anymore the previous day's carbon. Rather, you're going to put that on a separate pyre, according to Rabbi Meir. The kule alma miyas masifim boybiyot. Everybody, however, agrees that on Yom Kippur you had a special fire made for the fire for the incense that's going into the Holy of Holies, the Kodesh HaKadoshim, besides for the pyres that were there every day, whether it was 2 every day, and today in Yom Kippur you're doing a third, every day there were 3, you're adding a 4th, every day there were 4, you're adding a 5th. Either way, everybody agrees on Yom Kippur there was a special pyre for fire to make coal, to bring into the Holy of Holies, the Kodesh HaKadoshim, for the incense burning in there. Minalahu, how do we know that? This idea that there's a special fire for Yom Kippur. Nafkalu mivah. It says, and the fire on the Mizbeach, that extra, and the fire on the Mizbeach is to tell you that there was a special fire, that there was a special fire for Yom Kippur itself. So, the Torah says that there was an incense every day. The Kohen would come and take some ash off from the previous day's fire, and then he would take out the fire, and the fire on the mizbeach would burn entirely. And the fire is there for special teaching. And even the one that we saw earlier that did not want to learn at the bottom of the previous daf, where the Chachamim said, we don't say the drasha of the vav of the esh and fire is on the mizbeach, right? That's and fire, the esh, the ha'esh, and the fire. That's talking about a specific fire that needs to be on the mizbeach. That's talking about something specific, and that they do say a drasha. So it says in the pasuk that there was an esh tamid, a constant fire, al mizbeach lo sichbeh, on the mizbeach, it shall not be extinguished. So esh tamid l'mayasa, what does that come for teaching? That's coming for a special teaching. Another, as we learned in the Brisa, esh tamid tukal mizbeach lo sichbeh. A fire will be a constant fire will be lit on the mizbeach and not be extinguished. Limit al maracha shniya shel keteres. That teaches about the second pyre, right? So we said the main fire was for the burning of the parts that come on from a carbon. That was a large fire. The second fire was there that they would take coals from there for the keteres, for the incense in the morning, in the evening. So then it says, the Eish Tamid took out that there is a constant fire in the Mizbeach shall not be extinguished. It tells us about this second fire from which the coals were taken to burn the incense. It has to be on the outer Mizbeach. So even though the incense itself was burnt on the inner Mizbeach, the pyre for the coals that where the coals would come from was on the outer Mizbeach. Because this entire pasuk, or this entire parsha, this section that's talking about the fires on the mizbeach, is talking about the outer mizbeach, which is the copper mizbeach, the large mizbeach in the azara, and the incense itself, the keteres, was brought on the inner mizbeach, the golden mizbeach that's inside the kodesh in the Beis Hamikdash proper, and nevertheless the fire that where it came from would be on that on the mizbeach, on the outer mizbeach. Eish machta u'menorah mino, the fire of Yom Kippur, and which goes into the Holy of Holies, and the fire of the menorah, which is lit every day. How do we know that also comes from the outer mizbeach? So Eish Machta, the fire for the pan, which goes into the Holy Holies, and Eish Menorah, and the fire on the menorah. How do we know that it's a fire carried over from the mizbeach? V'dinu. So we learn it from a comparison of the words. Nemra Eish B'Keteres. By the incense, it says, and you will have a fire for the incense, for the keteres. And v'nemra eish b'machta. And it says fire, he will take burning coals for the incense to go into the Holy of Holies, and to be on Yom Kippur and the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Eish b'machta. And it says also by menorah. And it says by the menorah that there will be a fire. And Rashi points out that actually by keteres it doesn't say fire. What it says is you will turn it into smoke. Yaktirena. You can't turn it into smoke without fire. So, right, if the smoke is fire, if the pasuk says that yaktirena, that he will turn it into smoke, that means that there's fire there, and that's this idea. But in any case, it says eish by keteres, and it says eish, or the concept of eish, fire by the incense of Yom Kippur and by the menorah. Malahalan al mizbeach achitza. Just as by the incense, the daily keteres, the fire has to come from on top of the outer mizbeach, the mizbeach in the courtyard. Afkan al mizbeach achitza. So too, the fire is coming from on top of the mizbeach achitza in the outer courtyard, the outer mizbeach, the courtyard mizbeach. Gemara says, wait, how do you know that that's the comparison you should make? Or maybe take it the other way around. Nemra eish b'keteres v'nemra eish b'machta menorah. It says eish, fire, by the keteres, and it says fire by, or the concept of fire by the incense of Yom Kippur that goes into the Kodesh HaKadosh of the Holy of Holies, and the menorah, which is the daily lighting of the menorah in the Kodesh and the Beis Hamikdash. Maybe just as by the incense, it's the one that's closest to him, and he's on the Mizbeach HaPanimi. The Mizbeach, the outer Mizbeach. That's where he's coming and bringing the incense from. They're bringing the fire from. And where is he taking the fire to? He's taking the fire to the Mizbeach that's on the golden Mizbeach. So he's bringing the fire from the closest fire, which is he brings it onto the golden, from the outer Mizbeach, the altar that's in the courtyard, to the golden altar that's on the inside, and that's closest to it. Right? But now that he needs to light the menorah and bring the incense to the Kodesh HaKadoshim, maybe the closest fire is what's already on the golden Mizbeach, because that's the nearest fire. So maybe you have to bring the fire from there. That's why we have the special teaching. It says the fire is constant on the Mizbeach, and it's talking about the outer Mizbeach, a constant fire. This is the when I tell you to take fire, it's from the constant fire on the outer Mizbeach that's constantly there. And the constant fire is only on the outer Mizbeach. Lamadnu, and from there we learn Eish L'Menorah, Eish L'Machta. So that tells us the menorah, because there it says Tamid. The menorah, it says Lahalas Ner Tamid. And so just as the constant fire is on the Mizbeach, and it says that you're going to light a menorah which has a constant fire, the Ner Tamid, the constant light. So now I know that the fire for the menorah is going to come from the fire that's the constant fire on the Mizbeach. However, what about Eish L'Machta Minai? How do we know that the coals that are going to be brought into the Kodesh HaKadoshim on Yom Kippur, the Holy of Holies, and burning the incense in the Holy of Holies, how do you know there? That's not a constant. That's once a year. How do you know that also requires the fire from the Mizbeach? So the Gemara says, "V'dinu," it's a kal v'chomer logical conclusion. Emra eish b'machtav and emra eish b'menorah. It says fire by the sorry, not a kal v'chomer, it's a hekesh. Comparison of the words. It says fire by the pan that's bringing the fire into the Kodesh HaKadosh and the Holy of Holies. But emra eish b'menorah, and by the menorah. Malahalon al gabi mizbeach hachitzon. Just like by the menorah, it's clear that you're taking it from the mizbeach hachitzon, from the outer Mizbeach, where the fire is, Afkan al Mizbeach HaChitzon, so too for the menorah, it's coming from the outer Mizbeach. Gemara says, who says, maybe make such a comparison. It says fire by the Keteres, and which is the daily incense, and it says fire by the Machta, which is the Yom Kippur special incense. Maybe you just take it from the nearest fire, and in this case, it's already a fire on the inner Mizbeach. It says by the Yom Kippur service, and we'll end with this and continue with this tomorrow. It says by the Yom Kippur Avodah, and you will take a handful of coals, fire coals, from on top of the Mizbeach before Hashem. Which Mizbeach is before Hashem? Is a Mizbeach shemichtzasi lefnei Hashem, mi lefnei Hashem. Part of it is in front of Hashem. Ein Kollel lefnei Hashem, but not entirely in front of Hashem. Avayim is a Mizbeach chitza, and it's the outer Mizbeach. Tomorrow we'll continue with what is this idea that the outer Mizbeach is partially or not completely, not entirely in front of Hashem. Two versions of how to explain that, and then understand and continuing this idea that the fire for the incense has to also come from the outer Mizbeach.